All right. So, how can the story of Bathsheba in First Samuel save us from just this really big problem American Christianity has with moralizing the Bible, this moralization that just destroys the actual intended original meaning of Scripture, while at the same time re-enchant our sexual ethics and understand better the purpose and mission of Jesus? Hi, my name is Dr. Jordan Koss, and this is a Millennial Harbinger channel. This is like the last of 4 videos that I'm going to be doing on the women mentioned in Jesus's genealogy in the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew and Matthew chapter 1. Today we are going to cover Bathsheba, and we're going to do so by once again reading a section from Michael Heiser's book, Reversing Hermon, and see what he has to tell us there that can do just that for us, re-enchant and then do away with the moralization. And he's using as one of his primary sources a dissertation by Amy Richter. She wrote that dissertation on the Enochic Watchers template in the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And he's going to make some really interesting observations about Bathsheba and therefore help us read better 1 Samuel, chapter 11, that whole story with David, Bathsheba, and Uriah, as well as help us understand why she's even in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. All right, you ready? Let's do it. So the beginning of the section on Bathsheba is on page 83 in Heiser's book, and it goes a little something like this. The sordid story of David's adultery with Bathsheba and his subsequent murder of her husband, Uriah the Hittite, is well known. It's well known, all right. Now, is it interpreted and understood well? That's debatable, right? It is well known to Bible readers, 2 Samuel 11, verses 1 through 27. 2 elements of the Watcher's template are clear from the outset. Sexual transgression, who'd have thunk, right? Though Bathsheba is likely best understood as a victim, not the perpetrator, as well as warfare, so sexual transgression and warfare. The latter is clear in that the context for Uriah's death was the siege of Rabbah, or Rabbah, however you want to pronounce that, 2 Samuel 11:1. Richter summarizes how these 2 items work together in the story, and here's a big quote Heiser provides us from Richter's dissertation. Quoting Richter, recall that in 1 Enoch, Asael teaches human beings how to make weapons of war and materials for the beautification of women. The story of Bathsheba, David, and Uriah is a story that combines these elements, skills of war and a desirable woman. The scene of David on his rooftop shares elements from the Enochic scene of the Watchers about to transgress and leave their appointed heavenly station. David looks down from his roof and sees a very beautiful woman, 2 Samuel 11, verse 2. Just as the Watchers look down from lofty places and spy, quote, the beautiful and comely daughters of men, 1 Enoch 6:1. The fact that David is up on his roof is mentioned twice in the verse. Interesting. The woman's beauty is emphasized. The woman was very beautiful, 2 Samuel 11, verse 2. In 1 Enoch, after seeing the comely women, the Watchers decide to choose for ourselves wives from the daughters of men, 1 Enoch 6:1. David decides to choose for himself someone who is already the wife of a man. Shemihaza, the watcher, and David, the voyeur, share in knowing that what they do is wrong. Shemihaza knows that if he takes a human wife, he shall be guilty of a great sin, 1 Enoch 6:3. David knows that Bathsheba is already the wife of another man. Asael taught skills for the beautification of women. The women used them and made themselves irresistible to angels. 2 aspects are present then in this strand of the tradition. The women learned skills for making their physical appearance irresistible, and angels fell for it. No pun intended, right? Once the Watchers saw how beautiful the women were, they could not help themselves and were led astray, 1 Enoch 8:1. In this telling, then, the women bear some responsibility for the angels' misdeeds. Okay, so that's the end of the quote from Richter. Now here's what Heiser highlights several different things in this next page. All right, we're going to read starting in page 84. Some items deserve attention, he says. Uriah was one of David's Giborim. There's that word again that several of the other men associated with the women mentioned in the genealogy were called as well, right? Just lost my, there it goes again. Fixed it. So Uriah was called a Giborim of David, 2 Samuel 23:39. As we saw with Ruth, being married to a Gibor may have made certain Jewish readers suspicious of a connection to the giants. Bathsheba would therefore be another ancestor of Jesus with a Gibor. Crazy, I know. Okay. Next, number 2. More interesting, perhaps, is the fact that Bathsheba became the Gevirah, the queen mother. This term is the feminine equivalent to Gibor. It is not specifically used to Bathsheba, queen wife to David, though it is used for of other Israelite queens. 2 Kings 10:13, 2 Chronicles 15:16, Jeremiah 13:18, 29:2. Scholars disagree on whether the Gevirah had any official governmental function. There is sparse textual support for the idea. In Bathsheba's case, the only role she seems to have had was to solidify Solomon's claim on the throne, 1 Kings 1. That role may have arisen ad hoc out of the circumstances. All right, and lastly, he says, number 3, Bathsheba's name itself is of interest. In 2 Samuel 11, where readers first encounter her, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam. In 1 Chronicles 3:5, she is given a different name, Bathshua, the daughter of Amiel. In Hebrew, the first part of the name, bat or bath, means daughter. All right? That's why you have bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah. Yeah, okay. Got it. See what I'm picking up? There goes my light again. I don't know why it keeps going on. Okay. And so the name from 1 Chronicles means daughter of Shua. We have seen the name Shua before back in, guess where? Genesis 38, right? It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. We just read a few verses 1 and 2 from Genesis 38, and seeing how Bathsheba or Bathshua is connected somehow to Tamar and Judah in Genesis 38. Here's what Heiser says. The daughter of Shua was Judah's unnamed wife. It was after her death, Genesis 38:12, that Judah unknowingly solicited a prostitute who wasn't a prostitute, Tamar. Since Judah's wife was clearly a Canaanite, scholars have theorized that Bathsheba was as well because of the name given to her in 1 Chronicles 3:5. This possibility would mean that Bathsheba and Uriah were not a mixed couple, but both Gentiles. The connection back to Tamar is interesting for our purposes because it strengthens the idea that Matthew is picking up on women with specific histories for inclusion in Jesus' genealogy. Okay, and that's what Heiser has to say about Bathsheba and her connection to the Enochic Watchers template, both in warfare and in sexual transgression. There's so many things. If we actually look at the story in 2 Samuel in Hebrew, there's probably so many things, hyperlinks, right, that Tim Mackey likes to call them. So many connections to prior stories that the story of David and Bathsheba and Uriah kind of build off of and play off of. Okay. The last closing paragraph of this entire chapter, this is what Heiser gives a summary. So here we go. We began this chapter with the thesis drawn largely from the work of Richter that Matthew was familiar with the sins of the Watchers, the Enochic template, as he's been calling it. The Watchers were blamed for sexual transgression and corrupting humanity with forbidden knowledge. All 4 women in the genealogy of Jesus are connected in some way with sexual transgression, seduction, and warfare. The connections are both thematic and textual. This can hardly be a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. Yet, you're not going to hear this angle At most churches, right? I mean, I didn't growing up, and I went to church 3 times a week. I went through grad school and seminary and not hearing about this angle. It was like first in graduate school when I first kind of learned how to read Genesis 6 uh, from a more enchanted understanding, the way that the ancient Jews and Christians would have read it. But it was only touched upon. There was no like further diving into that until finally I came across Heiser's material. So I really appreciate Heiser. Okay, so this is not a coincidence. Um, most people have not heard this, though. The effect of their inclusion in the genealogy is to direct readers' attention to the one to whom the genealogy belongs, the son of Abraham, son of David from the tribe of Judah, born as a result of a divine human interaction approved by God for the purpose of repairing the consequences of the proliferation of sin among humankind, a proliferation laid at the feet of the Watchers. Okay, and that proliferation of sin is first and foremost highlighted by sexual transgression, which again is why sexual transgression is highlighted throughout the entire Old Testament and by Paul and the New Testament writers, specifically homosexuality, as in Romans 1, and Jude and Peter highlight as well the connection between the Watchers and the generation of the flood and Sodom and Gomorrah and the false teachers. All right, sexual transgression is highlighted. I think Heiser would argue, as well as many other scholars of Second Temple Jewish writings, because of that connection to the Watcher story from Genesis 6 and First Enoch. So, guys, we got a long way to go to help a lot of churches and Christians understand so many stories in the Bible from this angle, right? The Enochic Watchers template to try to re-enchant our reading of Scripture. Now, again, the first 7 or 8 episodes, I wanted to try to help us re-enchant our reading of Romans 1 in light of Heiser's Deuteronomy 32 worldview, which builds off of course, that second rebellion in Genesis 6 of the Watchers. And we got to be careful, though, because it's like and you learn when you go through college and seminary and graduate studies in Bible, you learn pretty quick to be careful what you share. Even though you're so excited to share it, you be careful what you share in church or wherever you might have a job, especially as a teacher, let's say perhaps at a Christian secondary school. Whereas it's just like church, most people haven't heard this stuff. So if you try to give them a paradigm shift or how to understand a story for people who are so used to moralizing the Bible, moralizing the gospel, moralizing everything, that if they hear this take, they're going to think, yeah, that's heresy, or that's totally wrong. That's a threat. We got to get rid of that guy. It's happened to me multiple times, but it's okay, and that's why Heiser always says it's like, he's a theological mutt. Like, where could he be hired? Most schools and churches would not hire him. And so I'm like, wow, interesting. Like, the more education you get in biblical studies, it's in some ways, at least in my experience, the less hireable you are by churches and some or most Christian schools. It's almost as if the many Christian schools prefer less educated people to teach Bible. For one, you got to pay them less, right? And two, biblical studies makes you weird. But as Heiser says, if it's weird, it's important. I'm weird. I'm important. But Bathsheba and David and Uriah can totally help us re-enchant our sexual ethics and understand the mission of Jesus in light of what Heiser through Richter presents to us in his book Reversing Herman. And man, it can help us re-enchant our sexual ethics, particularly in light of what Paul and other stories in Scripture has to say about homosexuality, same-sex sexual behavior, and lifestyles. The modern trend and retorts of affirming scholars and Christians and authors and speakers, they kind of fall flat because they don't address this. And if they address this angle at all, it's very brief and it's not in depth at all. They just dismiss it. And I think that this angle is really important in which to approach this modern day issue of the trend of affirming same-sex sexual relationships and marriages, etc., in the church today and without, but especially within the church, right? Because we judge one another within the church. We don't judge outsiders, the world. And so to judge is not a bad thing. To judge is a good thing. To judge is human because we're called to judge, to determine with God's wisdom what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, we're all judgers, and that's a good thing. That's what we were made to do, to determine good and evil in God's eyes, not our own. And so, guys, that's it for this series on the women mentioned in Jesus' genealogy and how they can help reenchant our sexual ethics, as well as understand the mission of Jesus better. Appreciate Heiser and his work here in Reversing Herman and other places. And I'm going to stop right there. Hope you enjoyed this series, especially this video. We'll be back with another episode on another topic. Until then, we'll see you later. Bye.